Last week in Michigan politics, final farewells to the nation's 39th president, Jimmy Carter. What one of his closest friend, Michigan's President Gerald Ford, had to say through his son in his honor. Plus, a new state house sworn in on Wednesday, what took place and what we could expect from the year ahead as Republicans take the gavel. And as the months-long saga to seat a permanent replacement continues, Ottawa County names a new interim administrator amidst an hours-long and contentious board meeting. What happened and who was chosen? I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on your side rundown. President Jimmy Carter is at his final resting place in Plains, Georgia, after a private service Thursday for family and close friends. Earlier that day, a state funeral was held at the National Cathedral in Washington. One of the eulogies came from Gerald R. Ford, written before his death. We look at what the former president wrote years ago and why writing it was so important to him.
According to a map, it's a long way between Grand Rapids, Michigan, and Plains, Georgia. But distances have a way of vanishing when measured in values rather than miles.
It was a show of friendship that defied even death, as the words of the late President Gerald Ford rang out in the National Cathedral at the funeral of former President Jimmy Carter, and for a very specific reason.
He said, "I want to ask a favor of you." And I said, "You can ask anything you want to, Jared, and I'll do it, I'm sure." He said, "I want you to give the eulogy at my funeral." And I was really taken aback. I didn't know what to say. And I finally said, "Okay, I'll promise to give yours if you'll give mine if I pass away first."
And so they did. But with Ford's passing 18 years before Carter, Ford entrusted the reading of his written eulogy for his friend and presidential successor to his son, Stephen.
By fate of a brief season, Jimmy Carter and I were rivals. But for the many wonderful years that followed, friendship bonded us as no two presidents since John Adams and Thomas Jefferson.
While the two had once competed to be the most powerful man in the world, their post-presidencies marked by a unique shift. There was much more in common between them than they may have once thought.
Discussing our families, our faith, and sharing our experiences and discovering that there is indeed life after the White House.
But it may not yet be over, as they now have, in Ford's words, much to catch up on.
Jimmy Carter's legacy of peace and compassion will remain unique as it is timeless. Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome home, old friend.
And you can watch the eulogy in full under this story on our website, 13onyourside.com. You can also find a new hour-long special on the incredibly close, unique, and perhaps unexpected friendship between the 38th and 39th presidents, now streaming on our 13 Plus streaming app. And at the state capitol, lawmakers returned to Lansing this week for their first days of the 103rd state legislature. Republicans now control the state house, with Democrats still in control of the Senate and the governor's office. We take a look at who's in charge and what to watch. It's a new year, and with it, a new set of people who are going to be making decisions that impact our lives in ways some may not always expect. While the Democratic-controlled state Senate won't face their next election until 2026, the new Republican House majority under new Speaker Matt Hall coming to power.
There are a lot of other people here that worked with us along the way to help us win this majority back, and it was hard. We did it. And you were all part of this. This is for you.
Now we're looking at three things that we can expect to be some of the biggest storylines in this upcoming year. Something we are certain to see come right out of the gate: wages for tipped workers. What's at issue is the expected phase out of the state's tip credit that allows employers to only pay tipped workers a percentage of the minimum wage, have tips make up the rest, or pay the difference if the tips don't make up the rest. Phasing it out, some say, would increase costs for employers and could lead to lost jobs.
Once that's addressed, we're able to address the earned sick time part in a manner that makes it so small businesses can survive.
Another thing we're looking at, the roads. House Republicans at the end of last session were demanding that changes be made to shift more funding toward local roads that they say have been neglected.
Kind of flipping this formula a little bit, and for this new money, making sure it goes to our local county roads, our local city roads, our village roads.
And another area to be on the lookout, your taxes. 2 years ago, the income tax here in Michigan decreased based off of how much money was in the state's coffers. But last year, that was no longer the case, and it reverted to its higher rate. House Republicans have been vocal that cut should be brought back. And we're less than 2 weeks into the new year, but there are already some new laws coming into effect here in Michigan. Nearly 200 public acts were made law last year. 13 on your side, Stephen Bonner takes us through some of the legislation that could impact you and when to expect it.
As part of the state Supreme Court's ruling on tipped wages, they also received another law surrounding sick time. Employers in Michigan with one or more employees will have to abide by new sick time requirements for employees beginning on February 21st. This new law requires that employees accrue sick time at a rate of 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. Depending on the size of your business, all or part of that accrued sick time would be paid by the employer. A total of 72 hours per year can be accrued. Another law going into effect this year will expand unemployment benefits for Michiganders. Beginning on April 1st, unemployment benefits will increase to $446 a week from $362 a week. These benefits will continue to increase yearly until 2027 when it reaches $614 a week. The new law also expands eligibility for unemployment benefits from 20 weeks to 26 weeks. A change in firearm open carry laws will also go into effect on April 1st. The new laws will prohibit the open carry of firearms at polling locations, clerks' offices, early voting locations, and absentee ballot drop boxes during elections. The ban extends 100 feet from those locations and is only active on Election Day for polling locations, during early voting periods for early voting locations, and for 40 days leading up to an election for absentee drop boxes and clerks' offices. And then 2 new types of automated traffic enforcement laws are also coming to Michigan this year. Starting on April 1st, the Michigan Department of Transportation will be allowed to install automated speed enforcement systems in construction zones. If the automated system catches a driver going faster than 10 miles per hour over the speed limit while workers are present, they can be issued a citation. Fines range from a warning up to $300 for continued violations. School buses will also be allowed to be equipped with cameras for enforcement of traffic violations. Also starting April 1st, buses can use the cameras to record or photograph vehicles failing to stop for the bus. If you are caught failing to stop, you can face a civil infraction and fine between $100 and $500. The money from the fine will go directly to the school district the bus was working for. You can read more about these new laws and dozens of others going into effect this year at 13onyourside.com. For 13 on Your Side, I'm Stephen Bonner.
And in Ottawa County, the new Board of Commissioners got down to business this week in another day-long meeting that lasted roughly 9 hours. There's a new interim administrator as part of a months-long process to find a permanent replacement. We've got the story on who was chosen and what else happened.
That is unbelievable.
Tensions high in Ottawa County at the second meeting of its newly elected Board of Commissioners. It was a meeting largely centered around structuring county government under the new board.
These are the rules that will govern us going forward. Everything we do will hinge on this.
But in the early hours, pushback from some commissioners linked to the conservative group Ottawa Impact, now ousted from the majority by a new group of Republicans.
I think it's important to take a stand and let you guys know that leadership matters.
The division visible when it came to things like appointing an interim county administrator, meant to fill what has now become a months-long gap left by the firing of former Administrator John Gibbs. Multiple interims have since been in the post, but nothing permanent.
There's no central coordination. I need an orientation. It's nuts.
Tuesday, the board choosing former County Sheriff Gary Rosema for the post. But that appointment drawing some commissioners' concerns after the former chair said he was informed of consideration between Rosema and Chair John Teeples to rehire the county's former corporate counsel, Doug Van Essen, whom the former chair characterized as having
toxicity to constituents, willingness to abuse government power to threaten citizens.
Rosema taking to the podium and defending his relationship with the former counsel, who gave his resignation shortly before the last board took office.
He represented the department, he represented me, he represented our employees, and he did an excellent job.
But seeking to, in his words, clarify for the former chair, Rosema's mindset, he said, had not been placed. Where the previous board also had been accused amongst members of the public of a lack of transparency, some commissioners believe certain items now were not transparent, marking a new chapter in the years-long saga to find what the county can agree to be good governance.
But I want everybody to understand what I'm trying to do to be transparent without any excessive authority by me.
Josh Alburtus, 13 on your side. And in Muskegon County, the city of Muskegon Heights now has a budget for this year. The city council passed it during a special meeting late Thursday afternoon. It was approved unanimously. The budget was supposed to be approved before the end of 2024, but the council did not have enough people to vote at the December 30th meeting. Earlier this week, they approved an interim budget for the quarter, but were able to agree on a budget for the year Thursday. Members say they can still make changes even after approving the budget. And as we began this episode in memory of President Jimmy Carter, we end this episode with some of his legacy. During Carter's funeral service, it was noted that he signed legislation that cleared the way for the craft brew industry, now estimated to generate $70 billion a year for the U.S. economy. 13 on your side's Alexis Dumergine talked with some of our local brewers about that.
Without that law in place, most of us wouldn't be here.
Today and all weekend, brewing professionals are gathering in Kalamazoo for the annual Michigan's Great Beer State Show and Conference, a conference they have been holding since 1998.
It's a constant reminder of really what our roots are, right? We've got folks that have been doing this for 20, 30 years now, and you've got folks that have been open for a year or two. And we're all sitting around the same table, sharing ideas and helping each other out.
President Carter paved the way for this industry with the law he signed in the 70s, including an amendment that said in part, any adult producing wine and beer for personal and family use and not for sale would not have to pay wine or beer excise taxes. The amendment also set limits on how much an individual could brew for personal use, 200 gallons for 2 people, 100 gallons for 1 adult.
So what he did was officially codify that you can do this at home, and I think it made a statement, and it helped set the tone for some of the growth in the industry, and it certainly, we look back fondly at President Carter doing that.
Owners honor the fact that President Carter's work made it possible for them to share their passions with the community.
And you think about what Carter's work did to open the door for where we are today. Now we've got, I think, 400 craft breweries in Michigan, and it's a industry that means a lot to people, and jobs and creativity and gathering places. It's pretty cool.
Brewing professionals from all over West Michigan get to sit with one another and learn from each other, some who have dedicated their whole lives to the brewing industry.
It's so fun. That's my favorite part of being in this industry, is that it's very welcoming. We share information, we try to help each other. I have been in it for a long time, so if I'm able to pass along some wisdom to some of the people that just start, I love to do that.
And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.